We will be starting today with some welcoming remarks by Professor Cole Durham, President of G20 Interfaith Forum Association, Bani Dugal, Principal Representative of the Bahá'í International Community at the UN, and Dana Homaid, President, Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities. We invite the three of them to come and sit on the stand. Thank you. They will also speak in that order: Professor Durham, Bani Dugal, and then Dana Homaid.
Well, it's a real pleasure to see everyone here, and in some ways I feel like we had a wonderful launch last evening with the pre-meeting with Harsh Shringla, and with so many of you here. We're glad to see you this morning, and we'll start going through things. I want to start just by expressing great thanks for the Baha'i, that we can be here at the Baha'i House of Worship, and I'm extremely grateful for the hospitality, service, and friendship of the Baha'i community. I'm also grateful to the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities, and you'll be hearing from Dana Homaid in a moment, but they have done an extraordinary work in helping to bring this together, in helping with the travel, with the hotel, with all kinds of things that have made this really, I think, a successful event. And of course, I'm grateful for all of you who have been able to come, the many friends who are here, and to make arrangements for this event. Now, as you heard last night, the theme of this year's G20 is, and I'm not sure I can pronounce this right, so forgive me, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which translates as one earth, one family, one future, which I can pronounce. You also heard about the importance of unity. We were privileged to have with us on an informal basis Harsh Shringla, the Chief Coordinator for India's presidency of the G20. He has spoken in other contexts of the importance of not being distracted by other contentious geopolitical issues. And I think one reason in general that India in particular and the policy world in general chooses to avoid official engagement with religion is the tendency of religious groups to be divisive, or to be perceived as being divisive and as adding to polarization. One of the virtues of the G20 Interfaith Forum is just the opposite, bringing interfaith voices together to identify areas of priority, consensus, and strength. This year we have identified a series of issues that affect the most vulnerable groups, summarized by 4 C's: COVID, conflict prevention, children, and climate. And I suppose in a deep way, what is really necessary is creating a new climate, not merely in the physical sense, but in the social world. We need to have reduced polarization. We need increased collaboration. We need to be able to identify concrete, practical things that can be done. And each of the sessions here, as we go through the 2 days together, offers opportunities to think about practical things, that there's a consensus that what needs to be done, these are high priority issues, and how we can make practical recommendations, both recommendations themselves and recommendations for what needs further study. We've heard important voices this year of the importance of the developing world being heard. I know from our earlier conference this year in Ethiopia. One of the major recommendations we're making this year is that the African Union be a member, or certainly a stable fixture in the G20 process. We pray and hope that the energy, dedication, and altruism of religion should be channeled in positive ways by collecting insights and undertaking further research. So let me just say, we hope that we can contribute in positive ways to one earth, one family, one future, and may our time together contribute to finding a unified path forward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody rested well, and delighted to see everyone here again this morning. And for those who were not there last evening, we really missed you. As you've heard from Cole and many times last evening, the theme for this year's G20 is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I think Cole pronounced it better than I. One earth, one family, one future, which affirms the value of the interconnectedness of all forms of life. We are at a stage where growing numbers of people around the world are acknowledging the need for a harmony between the material and spiritual dimensions of human existence, and for them to advance together. For too long, they've been kept separate, and humanity's existence is governed not only by physical forces, but also social and moral laws of cause and effect. From this perspective, the path to a more harmonious relationship with our world and with each other cannot be one of technological adjustment alone. It must also involve communities and societies learning to align themselves with higher principles and purpose. Though there's been a growing recognition around the value of religious communities contributing to global agendas, we have seen that there are some that want to have nothing to do with religion for various reasons. This concern, as Cole mentioned, is not unwarranted, for unfortunately religion, whose very reason for being is a service for the well-being of humanity, has sometimes been used contrary to what its truest purpose represents. In its basest expression, it has lent its credibility to fanaticism or has been the source of contention, such perversion of religion is deplorable. And then for others, its value remains aspirational, with its appreciation in advancing global agendas, often confined to spaces at higher levels. We are yet to find a connection with the countless networks of religious communities across the globe. So I think the Interfaith 20 Forum and the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities and many other networks are attempting to do just that, to connect those higher principles at local levels, but also with the global agendas for development and the Sustainable Development Goals at the UN, but also at the grassroots. And I think we need to have more of that. Multi-partner approaches require us to connect our global agendas to religious communities at the grassroots. And all too often, we find that there's that disconnect. And I'm hoping that through these meetings and others, we are going to be able to make those connections which are so important. Because while religious leaders have the advantage of engaging in forums such as this, the populations, our religious adherents, don't always have that. And I think it's our responsibility. And there is a session tomorrow or later today on this interconnectedness. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I also believe that much could be learned from a systematic and scientific inquiry into communities that are learning to apply spiritual principles such as selflessness, solidarity with others, and stewardship for the natural world to advance broad-based social progress. From the experience of the community I represent, the worldwide Baha'i community, individuals, communities, and institutions have been working together with collaborators from diverse backgrounds for the betterment of their societies. And I'm so happy to be here in New Delhi, and there are many Baha'is from India who can share with you the experience that they are having in the community building process, which I, sitting in New York, can only talk about in theory. But lastly, I just want to say that religion has a unique power, and I don't need to tell you all that, but it has the potential to awaken whole populations, the capacities to love, to forgive, to create, to dare greatly, to overcome prejudice, and to sacrifice for the common good. And ultimately, the role of religion in society and sustainable development must be further highlighted, both in discourse and policy. Were it truly to be drawn on, faith could impart a light amidst a darkened world and infuse a materialistic society with a valuable source of insight. Much needs to be done to channel its full potential and to shift the way we view this important source of knowledge. Indeed, religion is also an important source of knowledge, and I think increasingly that is becoming forgotten. As we are reimagining various processes and structures to respond to rapidly changing realities, so too must our conception of spirituality and its role evolve. So I'm really looking forward to learning from everyone. We have a powerhouse of knowledge in this room and so much expertise. And as in past forums, I'm truly awaiting to learn from all of you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, everybody. I know it's customary that after we finish with our event, we will be thanking everybody who worked on it. But in my culture, we extend thanks first to encourage everybody who's doing the great work to continue doing it in the coming few days. So I would like to really thank the Baha'i House of Worship for having us here. Bani, thank you so much. Nazmeen, Carmel, Rosie, Faraz, Marianne, Hunter, Braden, and others, thank you so much in advance for making this. I'm very happy to be in New Delhi again, and I'm so sorry I was not here yesterday, but after a lot of work for months with a certain government, we were able to have a breakthrough and reach agreement on building a child protection center and building a domestic violence system for women in a country nearby. And the reason I'm bringing that up is this is exactly the mission of each and every one of us in this room, even if we don't articulate it in that word. It's driving change and being an agent of change. Faith is not only a moral compass for all of us. Faith is a convening power, and we need to use this convening power for good, to bringing people together, to be inclusive to everybody's voices, and to make sure that grassroots level has a platform where their experiences, their voices, and their concerns are brought forward. And I think in this process that we've embarked on with IF20, with Professor Cole and with Catherine, really it has taught me a lot about the power of voices of faith, experts, civil society, and the process leading to the G20 meetings. Often G20 leaders have a set agenda, and I know that the agenda in advance is a very sexy agenda with like sexy topics that concern cultures from all around the world and concerns communities from around the world. But behind closed doors, what the discussions that take place will be mostly around economy and mostly about investment and mostly about political power and geopolitical powers. So it's up to you, those people in the room and the people I met in Abu Dhabi in December and the people will be meeting around the world leading to the G20 meeting, to really bring the topics with passion and with content and with consistency and with truth and honesty to the table in order for us to be able to include all of our voices forward to G20 leaders, really. Inclusivity is critical, and I think in the process with Professor Cole and Catherine in the previous few months, we have saw how we seeked each and every one of you from different cultures and from different countries to be in the room together, to be able to discuss those topics. As Bani put them very beautifully, I won't be able to say what Bani and Professor Cole said about the theme of today, but one earth, one family, one future is really at the forefront of what we are trying to do. And I believe that the coming few days will be as fruitful as the days that were in Abu Dhabi and as the days that whenever you all are in the same room. Whenever you are in the same room, there is always this power of change. It's so inspiring, it's so motivational, it's something that drives fire inside of me personally, and it's something that we all enjoy together to bring to the table. So thank you so much in advance to the great discussions. I'm here to learn, and I'm here to try as much as possible to facilitate the discussions and facilitate the conversation. Thank you so much for being here and for taking time off of your schedule. Some of you fly very far. Some of us are still jet lagged, but we are all here in the room with big smiles. I see all of your big smiles, and I'm very optimistic about the coming few days. Thank you.
Continuing our introduction of the forum, we would like to invite the next six speakers to come up and sit at the table. First, Nalakshi Rajkoa, Director, Office of Public Affairs, National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of India. Next, Archbishop Felix Machado, Archbishop of Versailles, Secretary General, Catholic Bishops' Conference of India. Third, Ravinda Singh Ahuja, President, Sikh Forum. Fourth, Sadhvi Bhagwati Saraswati, Secretary General, Global Interfaith Wash Alliance Rabbi. David Saperstein, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. And finally, Dr. Khawaja Iftikhar Ahmed, founder and president of the Interfaith Harmony Foundation of India. We will conclude this introduction with a video message by Aza Karam, Secretary General of Religions for Peace. As these six wonderful speakers come up and take their seat, I would like to also point out the beginning of the title of this event, Partnerships in Action Towards One Earth, One Family, One Future. And I do hope that we do make a lot of partners during this time together and think about different ways that we can make partnerships as we work together on some of the things that we will be discussing. Thank you. And we will talk in that order with Nalakshi Rajkawa starting.
Good morning, distinguished speakers on the dais and their delegates who have traveled from different countries. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak at this important forum. I'm very delighted to be part of it. You know, when you are the first speaker on the panel, you have a lot of responsibility. So I was not expected that I had to come first. But I think in the opening remarks from the organizers already set the tone of the conference by talking about the important role of religion in society. I'm going to speak in this 4 or 5 minutes in the Baha'i community's understanding and our respond to the challenges of our community and how we can create a community who always thinks of a collective endeavors, try to take responsibility of their society. From the India's context, there are many factors contributing to keeping India together as a nation. Few can deny that a vital cohesive force that binds the nation together is the spirituality of its people. This spirituality finds expression in a culture that values human beings as the creation of the divine, is open and accepting of people of all backgrounds, that views in all living beings the reflection of the sacred and therefore enjoins respect, gentleness, and non-violence in all relationship as the ideal way of life. It is this spirit of an all-embracing oneness that is conveyed in the ancient ethos of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. This ethos implicitly envisages that the unity of the nations will be a stage in the process of the progressive manifestation of the spirit of oneness in the social and political realm. It reaches its fruition when the principle of the oneness of humanity is firmly established in the consciousness of people, and when India and its sister nations across the world unite as one family. Friends, over the past few decades, we all know that there has been a worldwide resurgence of religious fundamentalism. Voices that represent religious extremism and intolerance have increasingly entered the political and social mainstream, and in many countries, they now dominate public discourse. This has created an atmosphere of confusion around the concept of religion, where its unifying and constructive role has been steadily obscured by the tendency to view it solely through an identity lens. India, too, has not been immune to it. And these challenges come at a time of great uncertainty in world history, when the need for internal unity is vital to successfully navigate the waves of present and impending crises that can gravely undermine the nation's progress, including the global pandemic, increasing geopolitical stability and war, economic recessions, climate change, terrorism, and global food and energy crisis. The need of the hour then is for a constructive discourse involving leaders and representatives of all religions in India on the role of religion in contributing to social harmony. I think in the opening remarks, Bani and Professor Cole and Diana had already mentioned this, like how we can raise consciousness in the community to see how each and every one of us can be part of the society building power, and how each one of us, we have the capacity to bring change, and we all want to, have a society which is peaceful and harmony. So it's very important that we promote this constructive discourse about the role of religion in society, which really can bring change. Preserving these traditions of interreligious fellowship and perpetuating them requires efforts from individuals, communities, religious leaders, and institutions of society, such as the media, education system, and the state. However, such efforts can close in on themselves if interreligious unity is considered an end in itself and is not viewed in the context of society's needs at this moment in history. Unless united communities are driven by a common objective to contribute to the transformation of society and to ever-increasing material and spiritual prosperity, unity can become a pretext for passive conformity with the status quo, with all its attendant challenges and injustices. The most secure basis of interreligious harmony would thus lie in religious communities coming together to apply spiritual principles common to all religions for building a more united, just, and prosperous world. Friends, addressing the complex and unprecedented challenges of the 21st century will require the masses of humanity to make deep changes in their pattern of thought and behavior, and willingness to make profound sacrifices for the common good. The kind of structural and systemic changes that are needed to become more just, united, and restore our balance with nature will require selfless efforts from the masses of humanity on a scale and for a duration never before witnessed. History bears witness that other than religion, no other power or man-made ideology has been capable of stirring the depths of human motivation and calling forth the spirit of nobility, sacrifice, and initiative needed to achieve such an objective. The world today is in dire need of the power of religion to once again course through the veins of a beleaguered humanity and to stir a common and collective response to humanity's challenges. We have, different actors who are playing role, but I think the most important role played by the religious leaders, and they have a unique role to directing the attention of their congregations to the needs of the world. Many heartening examples of religious leaders coming together to rally their congregations around the national drive to address common challenges could be witnessed during the worst phases of the COVID-19 pandemic in India. 25 religious leaders and representatives of interfaith movements in India issued a joint statement to the followers of all religions in India, when we are very happy to have Khwaja Iftikhar Ahmed with us, who is one of our signatories to that statement. So in that statement, the religious leaders reiterated those principles common to all religions that have the greatest bearing on people's response to the crisis. The statement, which was issued as an initiative coordinated by the Bahá'í community of India, called upon adherents of all religions to unite in a common commitment to 4 spiritual principles that have the most relevance to this crisis: recognition of oneness of a religion, the oneness of humankind, selfless and sacrificial service to the common good, and the complementarity between religion and science. Although this was a modest effort, it illustrated the tremendous potential for positive social change that resided in the untapped spirituality of the masses, which faith leaders could come together and channelize for the well-being of all. I think I'll leave it the questions which Professor Cole said, that how can we, bring the implications of religions, how religion can be, a force, and how we can channel that force for a positive change in our society. So with that note, thank you.
We would encourage the speakers to just stay at their seats. That will save us some time in between. And we would like to turn the time over to Archbishop Felix Machado. Thank you. And if you want to just speak at your seat. Yes, so if you can just speak at your seat, that will save us some time for the transition. Thank you. We can also see you better, too.
Thank you. Good morning. My colleagues on the dais here and my dear distinguished guests. There is always a feeling of great joy when people of different religions come together. Yes, we may have different ideas about the other and their religious traditions, but when we meet in the spirit of fraternity, sorority, recognizing one another as our brother, as our sister, we begin to discover the joy which comes also from mutual understanding. And what does fraternity mean? Fraternity means a sense of common brotherhood, sisterhood of all people upon earth, all being one people, one family, all having one future. Fraternity is the principle which gives unity and solidarity to social life. The implications of fraternity, sorority are also moral and spiritual. With this conviction, we can begin to see a ray of hope through conflicts and fears, through loneliness and insecurity being felt by many, through innumerable and gigantic problems confronting us. Though through our being together, we feel encouraged and strengthened in order to move to action. I wish to draw the attention of this august audience to the need of carefully grasping the meaning of the mention of one in the title of our meeting here. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the universal sorority, universal brotherhood. We talk of one earth, one family, one future. The one is not the mathematical reductionist concept which reduces reality to monism, monoculture, mono-religious world, this is not what one should mean. The attempt to explain anything in terms of one principle only, a kind of exclusivism. The one here is to be understood as the principle of unity of all, which also consists of diversity. For example, my own beloved nation, Mother India, is one, but its existential reality is of immense diversity. It is our respective belief that brings us together because there is much we share in common. Our respective beliefs do not kind of oppose one against the other, as it is already said about. It's not all about divisions and about hatred against one another. It is really coming together, loving each other, not in the sentimental and emotional way, but that essence of religion or culture or whatever we call it is best shown, SHONE, when we are really united in our diversities. The concept of one family could be understood on different levels. There are nuclear families, there are kind of religions. I feel sometimes when I gather with people of all religions that we are like a family. Here I feel with Baha'is. I've been here many times, I have friends here, and coming together is that family spirit. But there is also Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the universal brotherhood, universal sisterhood. And so our own Indian tradition that teaches us this beautiful concept, which we have taken as the theme for our G20, which has the presidents in India. The family basic cell of every society. And so I believe healthy families will create healthy society, and healthy society will create healthy humanity. Today the family is under attack. The welfare of the family at every level is decisive for the future of the world. I just kind of flash these themes that we will be discussing. There is a fear associated with permanent commitment, the obsession with free time, and I come to one future of humanity. We need to understand where children really are in their journey. education includes encouraging the responsible use of freedom to face issues with good lives and that of life of the community are in their hands, in the hands of children. And so our attention should be focused, if we talk of future, one future, on children. And where are these children? What are they doing? What are we doing? Where are we? I wish to end my modest comments by making an urgent appeal to all of us by asking, what can we do to end the present crisis of war, which does not seem to end? And how can we help establish permanent peace in our world? I think all religions speak of shanti, of shalom, of salam. I think simple maintenance of a balanced power between forces cannot mean, peace, nor can it be imposed at the dictates of absolute power. Peace is work of justice, product of order, as people hunger and thirst for ever more perfect justice. The common good that we are speaking about of the human race is the subject of peace. All must be committed to the ongoing effect of peace. Peace on earth cannot be maintained unless the good of the human person is safeguarded and people are willing to trust each other and share their riches of spirit and talent. Respect for other persons and peoples and their dignity is indispensable for peace among all. Peace is the fruit of love, genuine love, and love goes beyond what justice can achieve. We must praise those who renounce violence in defense of rights and have recourse to means available without injury to the rights and obligations of others or of other community. Religions can positively contribute to the richness of G20 discussions. Dialogue of collaboration among believers of different religions across boundaries is necessary to foster a culture of harmony and peace in our world. This collaboration must be founded on the rejection of fanaticism, extremism, and mutual antagonisms which lead to violence. Education as a means of promoting mutual understanding, cooperation, and respect is very important. And I think I must emphasize this point of one earth, It is the one earth for us. We must care for our Mother Earth, ecology. That should not be a peripheral topic for our discussions, but I think it needs to be brought in the center. We in India, but I think the whole world is experiencing this change of weather patterns. And I think that also should be emphasized in our discussions. This is what I think Dana was trying to talk about. Our discussions of G20, whatever they may be, they have their responsibilities. Our responsibility here is to focus on what we as faith communities, like people like me, I need to learn a lot if I am to be an effective leader of communities. I want to thank G20 Interfaith Forum, Dr. Durham especially, and Dr. Catherine Marshall, and Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities, our best friend here, Lady Dana. I want to also really be grateful to our Bahá'í community, which always stands on the forefront to bring people together, whether it be a worship there or just seeing the beauty of the temple, but more so when communities are kind of, coming this side. They may come as tourists, but I'm sure many of us come here to see the marvels, but afterwards we go back with a great message that the Baha'is share with us. Thank you. Jai Hind. Thank you.
To my friends on the dais and off the dais, I begin with a Sikh greeting, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, which means, may God and his followers triumph over all things. Sikhs believe in the unity of God and equate God with eternal truth. Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith, preached the belief in one God who is undefinable, immortal, omniscient, all-pervading, and the epitome of truth. Guru Nanak brought marriage and family within the ambit of religion. Renunciation is emphatically rejected. Salvation is not to be found by withdrawal to jungles or meditating in snowy heights. Instead, one has to live in this world and yet be untouched by it, like a lotus that remains dry in the water. The principles of Guru Nanak are strikingly simple. Kirt karo, do work, naam japo, meditate on his name, and vanchako, share in charity. He put in practice these principles of equality and oneness of the people. Women and men were on the same platform through an emphasis on service to humanity, through traditions of kirtan, which means chanting of hymns in praise of the divine, and langar, sharing of meals with everyone without distinction of caste, creed, gender, or rank. The importance of Sangat or community created a spiritual fraternity and had a social implication as well. While on gender equality, Guru Nanak was the first person, almost 550 years before today, who equated men and women together. And he said in the Bani, So kyo manda aakhiye jit jamme rajan, which means, why should you look low on a woman? She is the one who gives birth to the kings. And Guru Granth Sahib is the only holy book with music annotations for each verse and explains how it has to be sung. Sikhs are often the first responders in times of crisis, whether during natural disasters like famines, floods, or earthquakes, or man-made catastrophes such as war and conflicts, providing humanitarian assistance such as medical care, shelter, and feeding everyone without distinction with langar. Langar got a new connotation during the COVID period, especially in India, where we had a huge shortage of oxygen, and Sikhs set up oxygen langars all over. They set up temporary hospitals in gurdwaras, which are places of worship, because that is where a lot of space was available to us. They set up cremation services, burial services for the dead who died of COVID, even when their own family refused to touch them. There were 4,000 such services done in Delhi itself. One principle initiated by Guru Nanak Sahib was his focus on environment. To my mind, he was the first environmentalist in this world. In our daily prayer, we sing Pavan Guru, Pani Pita, Mata Dhart Mahat, which means Pavan is air. So he compared air with the Guru, which is the mentor, the guide. He compared Pani with Pita, which is Pani is water, with the father. And Mata, which is mother, he compared with Dharti, which is the earth. So he taught us to respect all the elements and ensure a healthy environment. As of inclusiveness in Guru Granth Sahib, there is the Bani of the Muslim saints of that period, Sant Kabir, Sheikh Farid. There is the Bani of Marathas. There is the Bani of Hindus. Irrespective of all, of any caste, creed, or color, or what rank they held in the society, whether they were barbers, soldiers, farmers, singers, butchers, traders, whatever they were. So this is one sign of inclusiveness. And Guru Nanak's closest and lifetime friend, with whom he started this spiritual journey, was a Muslim, Mardana, who was a devout Muslim, and a Hindu, Bala. To this gathering and the governments of G20 summit, I would recommend that we draw from our common spiritual principles of oneness, interconnectedness, love and harmony, generosity and compassion in all international and national policies to make unity of humankind a reality and forge a collective will to usher in a global consensus which transcends narrow national and communal interests in favor of a transformation that will ensure the material and spiritual prosperity of our entire nation. With that, I conclude, and I thank you all for having me here. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
I'd like to begin with a short prayer that says, Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhaved. It means, may all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings reach the height of their potential. May no being suffer. It's such a joy and such an honor to be together with you all. Deep, deep gratitude to Professor Cole Durham, Professor Catherine Marshall, Donna Homaid, the G20 Interfaith Forum, the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities, and their teams for realizing and recognizing that the G20 comes together to focus on finance, governance, security, development. But faith can play a critical role in ensuring that that governance, that development is sustainable, is peaceful, and that truly no one gets left behind. Deep gratitude also to Bani, Dugal, and the entire Bahá'í international community for opening their hearts and homes and hands so generously and gracefully for this critical conference. As we've been hearing since last night, the theme is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. But I want to take just a moment and go deeper into that, because the shloka in the Maha-Upanishad from which that phrase comes, the full shloka literally says, the small-minded one, the ignorant one, says, "This is mine, that's yours." The wise one knows that the world is a family. But here's also what's interesting. It's not a vague, amorphous family. Vasudha, in Vasudev Kutumbakam, Vasudha is the earth, but it's the mother goddess. So essentially what the phrase actually means is, we are not the family of a vague, amorphous world, but we are the children and the family of the sacred Mother Earth. And that teaching, that theme, anchors us in our priority of partnerships for action. Because Mother Earth and all of our family of every species with whom we share this planet need us to engage in action. Collective action, joining our hands, joining our hearts together, acting. The theme also reminds us, as we have one earth, one family, one future, that future is interlinked, interdependent. We are inextricably linked from each other, from a culture of oneness, from the protection of nature. So it also gives us a beautiful confluence, a theme of culture, nature, and future. Mahatma Gandhi said so beautifully, what is the point of that fast speed which has no direction? Technology, finance, science, they give us the speed, but faith gives us the direction. Technology brings the world to our fingertips, but faith reminds us there is a world beyond our fingertips. As we are building smarter and smarter cities around the world, digitally, technologically, faith ensures that the citizens of those smart cities, that their minds are filled with intelligence, with wisdom, with compassion. We know what we are facing in the world today with the climate crisis, with the food, water, land shortages that are about to become food, water, land crises. We are called upon as leaders of faith to respond to these in action, but also to respond to the fundamental problem, which is a crisis of consciousness, and to help treat not only the manifesting symptoms, but also that core problem of the crisis of consciousness. Here in these next 2 days, as faith leaders, we will give our experience, our expertise, but also our moral and prophetic voice to the leaders of these 20 nations who are coming together to make decisions for most of the world, to ensure that whether we're talking about education or healthcare or water or food or safety or security or human rights, that truly no one gets left behind. And lastly, as we are here offering our suggestions in policy and decision, we are also here to recognize and remember that as leaders ourselves in many of these 20 nations, to recommit ourselves together, hand in hand, heart in heart, to not only preach about the heaven or the moksha or the nirvana that people are going to get after death, but actually to act and to work to ensure that that heaven, that moksha, that nirvana is here on earth for our entire earth family. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be together with you these days.
I so deeply appreciate the wise words of my colleagues up here and the leadership of all of you who put this extraordinary conference together. And just one shout out to Cole Durham, I hope this cultural reference isn't lost, the Energizer Bunny of crossing the globe on behalf of the causes that bring us together here. There has been, I'm going to reflect more broadly on this process that we are all involved with, because since we began this 20 years ago, there's been a significant shift amongst academics and policymakers in their understanding of the role that religious entities can, do, and should play in local, national, and global economies and the interaction of religion with core interests within the G20 concerns: development, governance reform, gender equality, corruption reduction, conflict resolution, poverty reduction, healthcare, education, feeding programs, rehabilitation programs, disaster relief. You know the list as well or better than I do. It goes on and on. And in addressing the climate change crisis, most particularly the support the religious communities are given for provisions to deal with adaptation and mitigation of the heavily indebted poor countries, the HIPCs. Religion, religious institutions, religious leaders play vital roles touching all of these aspects of the broad G20 agenda, and the impact on our 4 Cs, and I would add also the empowerment of women, is absolutely inspiring. I would point out as well that we've seen more clearly the link of religion with national security concerns. If you cannot deal with combating violent extremism, counterterrorism, democracy stabilization, conflict resolution, without addressing the role of religion and engaging religious communities in doing so, both in the causing and, more importantly, in the resolving of these challenges. Look, one of the most effective antidotes to the hate, violence, and injustice that plagues the world is the power and effectiveness of the interfaith communities of the world working together. You heard that so beautifully from the Archbishop, indeed from every one of the speakers so far this morning. While we all have challenges we must face within our own faith communities, within our own nations, when we can work together, in our vast numbers, we can achieve things that none of us can possibly do alone. Perhaps most importantly, to build on what the Archbishop said, in the very act of meeting, sharing, dialoguing, and working together to do God's work here on earth, to bridge our divides, to enhance our cooperation, we're modeling the very world of which we dream and which we strive to create. So consider the impact of the last 25 years on interfaith cooperation on those core G20 issues. Think of the Jubilee campaign on debt relief, the role of engaged religious communities in addressing the HIV/AIDS crisis, the COVID crisis, albeit recognizing that some elements of the community pushed back on that, demonizing some of the very victims, spreading disinformation. But the role of the mainstream communities throughout the world and local communities was really inspiring in that. The influence of Pope Francis, his predecessors, and paralleled in every religion represented here, including, I would say, in Sadhvi's wonderful recent book, From Hollywood to the Himalayas, A Journey of Transition and Healing, in changing the local, national, international conversations of God's preference for addressing the needs of the poor. And finally, the role, as I indicated, of religion and climate change debate, engaging communities, to calling on them to protect God's creation, to frame it in terms of our responsibility to generations yet to come, one of religious great contributions to universal moral thought in the human family. This is something that is extraordinary. And we're meeting, the G20 is meeting, we're shaping up the next COP, and the fact that we're talking now about another $100 billion fund to help with the adaptation and mitigation of those countries that did the least to create the crisis and are the least prepared to be able to adapt to new technologies or mitigate the damage of this, speaks to, in part, the influence that the religious moral vision has had in this debate. And I lift up the Jubilee campaign. So one substantive point and one process point in conclusion. I lift up the Jubilees and campaign since once again the confluence of the general rise of indebtedness over the past 2 decades after the 99 to 06 debt relief programs were shaped and the vast borrowings that were needed to address the COVID-19 crisis, the impact on Russia's war in Ukraine has destabilized world economies, particularly distribution of food, requiring even more borrowing, and the low borrowing rates that encourage more robust borrowing for a decade on the global scene. We've now reached the highest debt levels in the past 50 years, if not since the end of World War II. And once again, we see debt payments crowding out government spending on food, medicine, healthcare, fuel, and the global scene, fuel imports, and the global scene becomes more complicated as China and private bondholders have become the largest debt holders, and they function outside the Paris Club norms and structures with their built-in protections against the debt crisis. Yet still, because of the changes we help bring about, and because of those low borrowing rates, the debt vulnerabilities today are not quite at the level they were in '99, but they're rising quickly, and if we don't act now, 5 years from now, we will face that kind of crisis again. And the lesson of the last time is stop it before it happens. And the process point is this. We're proud of what the religious communities of the world have done in terms of development, humanitarian relief, go down in providing health care and education, so many children across the globe. We're immensely proud. But too often, governments and international monetary entities are investing in the larger groups, often male-dominated larger groups across the globe, and not really getting money down to local groups who can do so much more. We're going to hear later from Adam Phillips from USAID, which is really moving to shift some of those paradigms, and I know that's happening elsewhere. This is absolutely indispensable, and we who recognize a paradox that religion is at once the most local way that people organize their lives and the most global way that people organize their lives, this becomes crucially important. And one last word. When governments act to restrict the expression of religious life, impose crippling regulatory schemes, or outright ban religious groups from engaging in their development and humanitarian work here that is so essential to their sense of religious obligation, the society and the vulnerable pay a significant price. Religious freedom is indispensable to have the kind of robust religious world that we so need. So God bless you in your work, and as we say in the Jewish tradition, may all, each and every one of you, go mechayel lechayel, from strength to strength in your doing God's work here on earth.
Sorry to come here. I feel more comfortable here. And I think it will be helpful for me to establish a better connect with each one of you. First of all, let me congratulate the Forum of G20 for shifting from economics to spirituality. And then I would also like to congratulate the Bahá'í House and the Bahá'í community of India and all those Baha'is who have come from all over the world for having organized such a wonderful gathering and for giving us opportunity to share our good thoughts with you. I will not go into what Islam says, what other religions says on peace, on harmony, on interfaith. I have something else to say to you. While endorsing every word which was uttered here by other respectable speakers, friends, everything is good around. All of us in various world forums, in various parts of the world, are talking of goodness, pleading goodness, funding goodness, and also working actively on ground for goodness. But look at the war, look at the violence, look at the intolerance, look at the shrinking space that we, the human beings who are discussing one earth, one family, one future, who will dispute this? Universe is one, divine is one, divinity is one. Isn't it enough for all of us to be together and to actually work for togetherness on ground? I think this is enough. But the fundamental question remains, why so much of fighting and infighting? The Muslims are fighting the Muslims. The Christians are fighting the Christians. The Jews are fighting the Jews. The Buddhists are fighting the Buddhists. Every community is fighting. And all of us from different faith communities come with our scriptures, with the quotes, with the verses. But what is happening on ground? On ground, things are not keeping us happy. I don't believe in using the words which offer negativity. I want to tell you, unless two things are done, it will be difficult to change this world. There is a word called indoctrination, which has the element and component of imposition, of coercion, of using of force, of making you believe what I want you to believe. The solution lies in the principle of lakum dinakum waliya deen, to be my way and to be yours way. Can't we respect each other's way? Can't we respect each other's civilization? Can't we respect each other's value system? Can't we respect our different choices? Can't we stay together with that? Is it necessary that you want me to be like you? This has never happened in the history of human civilization. This will never happen because, friends, diversity is the law of nature. And we have to learn to live with diversity and to live through diversity. That is the only way forward. And therefore, to conclude, though there is so much to talk and to say, to conclude, I would urge, with all honesty and credibility at my command, to each one of you, and through you to the world, and to all those who matters in governance and decision making, in policy formulation, in ideological formations and so on. Please pick up the agenda of conflict resolution. Until and unless we resolve the conflicts, whether they are regional conflicts, territorial conflicts, religious conflicts, even spiritual conflicts, political conflicts, and so on, technological conflicts, not much is going to happen on the ground. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm sure that our deliberations in the coming sessions are going to be useful and will be a great learning for all of us. And before I leave the dais, I wish and I pray that the deliberations succeed and in bringing out something which belongs to all of us. Friends, the answer to every situation, the answer to every conflict lies in togetherness. Let's be together and let's all work for togetherness. And for that, the land on which I am standing, India, it is the land of diversity. Here we honor diversity. Here we celebrate diversity. Here and there, few things, they don't matter. What matters is the essence, the spirit of this particular land. And I think this land shows the world the way forward, how to honor, how to celebrate diversity. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those beautiful words, all of you. You may go and sit down. We will now have a video presentation, just a short one from Aza Karam, who wasn't able to come, but she did want to also have some introductory remarks. As soon as that video happens, we would invite Catherine Marshall to come up and talk a little bit about the G20 experience.
Greetings of peace upon you all.
I guess they want.
Assalamu alaikum in my language. It is a great privilege and opportunity for which I'm very grateful to be able to address you here today. As a professor of religion and development, I have suddenly found myself over the last 5 years thoroughly inundated with publications, materials of various forms on religion and you name it. And this is only in the English language. I have yet to have a chance to look at what is published in Spanish, published in Arabic, published in French, and published in any other language. You see, the thing is, religions today are seen to matter in ways that they were not visible before. Not because religions have not been playing a role before. Religions have always been playing a very critical role in almost every arena of life. But because the awareness on the part of a number of different secular academics, policymakers, government representatives, intergovernmental representatives, non-governmental representatives, the awareness of the roles of religion has most certainly been heightened and amplified. This is also due in large measure to the influence of fora like the one that you are in today, the G20 Interfaith Forum. It is not a minor effort over time to keep bringing together those working in the space, either as practitioners or as policymakers or as academics. And the hub of knowledge of the G20 Interfaith Forum has continued to increase. But the truth is, it's not just the G20 Interfaith Forum. There are today 5 times as many interfaith organizations and initiatives than there were, again, just 3 or 4 years ago. And I think we're at a moment now with this 5-fold increase in initiatives around religions and that we have to begin to look very, very critically at what exactly does all this meetings and conferences and knowledges and trainings and research, what is it all producing? What is it leading to? We can understand where it's coming from, but where is it leading to? And that's the question that I hope you have a chance to address and answer. It isn't the number of initiatives that should matter. It isn't the amount of research that should matter. It should only tell us about rising interest. But what should matter at the end of the day is to make a difference to the realms in which we live today, to the crises, the multiple crises that humanity faces today. A crisis that has to do with a crisis of prosperity, meaning that we have more poor people on this planet than we have ever seen. We have an Earth, a crisis of planet. We have an Earth that is struggling to stay vibrant and alive, and we can't survive without it. We can't all go to the moon. We have a crisis of confidence in our leadership, all kinds of leadership, including religious leadership. And we have overall a crisis of accountability by all of us. Will our work actually lead to a change in behavior that leads to accountability to our international norms and standards? Will our work create greater sense of accountability of all institutions to all humans and this planet? And if our work is not leading to an increased sense of discernment and accountability of all institutions, then we are lacking. Then it becomes a fashion like many others. It is each one of us who has decided to serve in this space on religions. Each one of us is accountable. So as you discuss and debate and animate and reflect, please remember, what is this all leading to? And if it is more of the same, then perhaps it is time to pause and see, what is it that we are not doing? And perhaps what we are not doing is fewer conferences, fewer meetings, fewer prizes, fewer awards, fewer initiatives, and maybe just coming together to pool our resources together more so that we can do specific value-added initiatives together more, rather than more initiatives alone. Let's use the space of the G20 Interfaith to be a space that calls for accountability by us, for us, about the work that we do in the name of religions. Let it be a space of accountability, not where we beat ourselves up and say, oh, we could have done this, we should have done that. But what can we do now, moving forward, that will reduce the amount of travel to all sorts of places, of papers drafted by all sorts of people, and actually can go towards consolidating and serving communities and encouraging them to work more together, and thereby holding their institutions and their leadership and themselves accountable to the common good. Let's see, let's try. Let's try to make a difference by holding ourselves accountable. After all, that's what faith tells us to do. Thank you.
We are all of us very much on a journey, and my mission here is to give a few milestones in the G20 Interfaith journey that we have taken. There was a good inspiration that speaking from this podium is a little dangerous because the head vanishes, but hopefully we can overcome that. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the G20, why the G20. Secondly, why faith. Third, how does the G20 Interfaith fit within the overall constellation of the G20? Fourth, about the actual journey of the G20 Interfaith, which is, believe it or not, approaching 10 years. We could actually try to find out who here has actually been at every one of the meetings. Some of the major issues that we see before us, and then finally, sort of a major theme. So first of all, why the G20? It's very much part of global governance these days, created in 1999, with a primary mission for crisis management. And recognizing some of the difficulties of working within the United Nations system, the complexity. So trying to create a more flexible, a more adaptable, less formal mechanism. So hence the G20 came into being, and after the 2008-2009 crisis took on increasing importance. One of its features is that it rotates every year, so that's why we're in India. India is the host. And in December, India will pass the baton to Brazil and then to South Africa. So it is very much a rotating presidency, and each presidency takes on its own character. But one of the features of the G20 is that there is no secretariat. In other words, there is no permanent body of the G20. And so it does tend to focus very much on the meeting, the actual summit of the countries, which will be in September this year. So we are approaching the G20 summit. And that, by the way, is why we talk about the Sherpas, because it is a summit. And so the Sherpas are guiding the leaders as they move towards the summit. So the G20 really has focused, and really to a large extent still focuses on the management of global crises. And we are now in what we call the poly-crisis or the perma-crisis. In other words, the extraordinary combination of crises that we face today is very much what's on the G20 agenda. But their agenda has broadened so that it does now include the Sustainable Development Goals, which does mean the entire global agenda. So that is the sort of G20s, and that's clearly why the idea has been that the world of religion, or the worlds of religion, the interfaith worlds, belong as a part of the G20. And that idea, there's a predecessor to that, because religious voices have been, at least to some degree, part of the G7, which is the smaller grouping, going back into the 1990s. But the idea that there should be a structured, systematic, continuing voice of religious bodies in the G20 process really goes back to 2014 and the G20 meetings in Australia, when the G20 Interfaith, such as it is, was born. But the basic argument, you've heard it in many different voices and cadences in the earlier discussion. The basic idea is that with some 84% of the world's population having some religious affiliation, that it needs to have the voice, it needs to be part of these global discussions. So that's the argument of why there should be a G20 Interfaith Forum. So where does the G20 Interfaith fit within this complex G20 world? And some describe it as a constellation, which means you have a planet, which is the G20 summit, and around it you have engagement groups, you have ministerials, you have focus groups, etc. So there is actually a bewildering set of institutional forms around the G20, all with the basic objective of influencing the G20 agenda, and beyond that, looking to the global agenda by means of the G20. So one of the debates that has happened is, where does the G20 Interfaith fit within this constellation? And there have been some suggestions of the different engagement groups, the civil society, the women's group, the business group, the youth group, and the T20, which is the think tanks that in some senses the G20 Interfaith should be a part of those. But our sense, and that I think of others, is that there is something distinctive enough about the G20 Interfaith that it needs to have a separate voice and to be a separate part. But for a variety of reasons, it is an informal part of the G20 Interfaith, and there are advantages and disadvantages to having the G20 Interfaith as, I think, a valued and respected member of the G20 process, but having its own distinctive qualities, character, organization. So that is basically where we fit at the moment, somewhat less formal, but very much a continuing part of the G20 process. And so it started, as I mentioned, in 2014. We're now in the 10th year in which there has been a G20 interfaith process. And the G20 interfaith process consists, yes, in forums, in a meeting, but probably much more important in the continuing reflections, analysis, working groups, partnerships that characterize this group that is gathered here now, where all of us are working through a variety of networks. We call it a network of networks. Aza Karam mentioned the proliferation of different groups seeking to bring out the qualities of the interreligious worlds in more coherence and more better coordination towards a one earth, a one unity spirit. But this, we see the G20 Interfaith very much as bringing, offering the opportunity to a network of networks to come together, to coordinate, to look at what each other is doing, and therefore to bring more effectively the best of religion, the powerful voices, both the prophetic voice, but also the day-to-day knowledge into the deliberations of the G20. I started by highlighting that we are living in an extraordinary time of crisis, and in many senses, that puts a greater premium on the G20 leadership than has been true in the past when we faced crises as well. What we're seeing today is the intersection of the different crises, that there is no line that separates the climate crisis from hunger, from conflict, from refugees, from the plight of women and children, the conflicts that are facing the world. It's all coming together in a way that demands of the G20 leadership and of the partners of the G20 leadership, like the G20 Interfaith Forum, a particular focus on the voice that we bring and on the wisdom that we promise in what we do. So we are looking at all of these different dimensions. It's not difficult to take the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 169 targets, and for every single one, to highlight the faith dimension. That is something that is relatively easy for some people to forget, but we never do. That the religious communities of the world are part of every single one of these crises. But our challenge is much less to focus on water or to focus on specific issues, but on trying to see what the common lines are and the basic themes that bring us together. Which brings me to the last point, that in the effort to look at recommendations and our ideals of what we think that the G20 should do when they meet in their summit, clearly we have developed a series of specific recommendations in a number of sectors, particularly on the issues around health and COVID, which has been the crisis for the past few years, the crises of education, the crises of conflict which come out, the crisis of refugees, and I think a theme that unites us all is the focus on children. But if we look at what is the theme that we as this group put to the G20 leaders as they meet in their summit in September, it is never forget the most vulnerable. That is, in many senses, the idealistic mission of the religious communities in this particular setting. And that requires bringing together the specific ideas on each one of the sectors, because as our Shringley said yesterday, the G20 has a very sectoral focus, and yet it is our mission to try to see the common themes and above all to keep a laser focus on the problems of the most vulnerable, particularly children, women, refugees, the hungry, too many other groups, but that we see as the primary focus and the primary message. But during these days, we will sharpen and highlight those different ideas, proposals, urgings, and we see this very much as a continuing process where the G20 Interfaith will continue the journey, moving on from India to Brazil to South Africa, and we count on all of you and your networks to be part of it. So thank you.